For modern crime comics, there are some great examples to read. There's Sin City by the legendary creator Frank Miller. Next, there's Criminal by the excellent team of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. And there's 100 Bullets, the epic conspiracy-based crime saga by Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Riso. All three are good examples of modern noir. However, there's one more unique crime series that seems to be overlooked, and that would be Stray Bullets by David Lapham. It's a very ground-level, intense drama, with an intricate cast of characters drawn together through criminal misfortune. Like a fair amount of Lapham's work, it takes its time getting to where it's going. Multiple characters are introduced and then disappear into the background. Lives intersect and merge, like a nightmarish human overpass. There is rarely the sense that anything is linear. Time shifts backwards and forwards, slowly revealing the parts of an overall complex narrative. Stray Bullets focuses on the marginal people, the people who are mostly powerless and struggle to find any sense of happiness or purpose. Some are drawn into criminal or questionable activity by their more primal desires, such as lust and greed. For some, it's a matter of simple survival. Others are temptations, exemplifying the attractive rewards one gets for being selfish and indulging in basic human needs. It is not a glamorous world. It is dirty, gritty, and much like real life, happy tidy endings don't exist. Appropriately, it begins with a grim quote from an upbeat song. The future's uncertain, and the end is always near. David Lapham's career has rather humble beginnings. In 1991, when he was 20 years old, he got a job penciling licensed WWF comics for Valiant. Soon thereafter, he did a few issues of Magnus Robot Fighter and then co-created Harbinger with Jim Shooter. During the next few years, he mainly worked on that title, while also doing the odd fill-in issue for other Valiant comics. At the end of 1992, Jim Shooter was fired from Valiant. Almost immediately, Shooter started another publishing venture, Defiant Comics. Shooter then recruited Valiant talent to get the company started. Lapham was one of the creators that joined him. Together they co-created Plasm, which was later changed to Warriors of Plasm when Marvel Comics sued Defiant for using their trademark name. The cost of this lawsuit, Shooter's inability to secure investors, and dismal sales overall, destroyed Defiant in just 13 months. When Defiant collapsed, Lapham disappeared for 6 months. And when he did reappear in 1995, it was with a surprisingly mature, nearly unrecognizable style and a new self-published series called Stray Bullets. When describing the comic, Lapham stated, quote, "I always called Stray Bullets a domestic noir, meaning that it's a domestic drama using all the heightened elements of a noir story. But in the end, it doesn't matter if the characters are actual criminals and cops or whatnot." Stray Bullets is a misleading title. It implies these stories are random crime events and not related whatsoever. However, a complex, interconnected narrative begins to emerge very early. The first volume, The Innocence of Nihilism, lays the foundation with 7 short stories. Issue 1 takes place in 1997 and features Joey, a very disturbed individual who's in love with a corpse he calls Janice. He is delusional and exceptionally protective of this expired woman. It ends with Joey swearing to make someone named Harry pay for this woman's death. My personal theory is this opening story will lead into what will be the final story once Lapham decides to wrap up the series. It will be about Joey getting revenge on Harry. The rest of the series introduces all the individuals who shaped Joey, either directly or indirectly, into becoming an obsessive psychopath. Or possibly, those that will either help or hinder Joey's revenge mission. Naturally, the series will highlight how dangerous Harry is, and how difficult it's going to be for Joey to complete his mission. Again, that's my theory. The only aspect I'm confident about is the final story continuing where this first issue left off. As for the dead woman, Janice, Joey's obsession with her does get filled in much later. The actual identity of the woman does not, although I would speculate it's either one of 2 possibilities. Issue 2 goes back to 1977 and introduces a young Virginia Applejack. She witnesses a double murder committed by Spanish Steve, a man who works for an up-and-coming criminal, Harry. This incident makes Virginia more withdrawn and more of an outsider than she already was. At school, in a terrible mental state, she lashes out at a bully. In turn, the bully and his friends beat Virginia and scar her face. So the first and second issue not only introduce 3 important recurring characters, but they also establish the time frame of the series. It's going to take place over a 20-year period. The third issue, which takes place in 1980, focuses on Led and Nina, but we also get appearances from a young Joey and his mother Rose. There's also Spanish Steve, Monster, and Beth, who take on important roles in forthcoming volumes. It's a pretty busy issue that ends on a cliffhanger, the arrival of Harry, who remains unseen. Issue 4 takes place in 1978. Virginia runs away from home, and the story develops her interest in a criminal career. It's a pretty uncomfortable issue. The grown man who helps her is built up to be a predator, but he turns out to be a predator of a different nature. He uses Virginia for publicity. Issue 5 begins in 1981 and opens on Spanish Steve committing a hit and run in front of Orson, a nerdy, inexperienced teenager. Within the crowd of onlookers, Orson meets Rose. Thus begins their odd relationship. The issue ends with Orson meeting Beth just before another car hits another person. Issue 6 has no date and focuses on the fictional character Amy Racecar. It will be some time before it's revealed that Amy is an obvious piece of fiction created by Virginia Applejack. The fact that it has no date indicates the story isn't within Stray Bullet's continuity, but it does reveal Virginia's internal, violent life. It should be noted, the line between Amy's adventures and Virginia's life is quite thin. To close out the first volume, Issue 7 returns to focus on Virginia. It takes place in 1982 and involves the slow death of her father. This is the incident that leads to her running away from home once again. The very quiet subplot that ties all these stories together is a mysterious unseen figure known as Harry. We find out that in 1977, he was a rising presence in the underworld, and by 1980, he was the crime boss everybody feared. We also know he's alive and calling the shots in 1997. So he's an oppressive influence on all these different lives. He is, ultimately, the antagonist and the catalyst for all the events that unfold. Which leaves the question, who is the protagonist? At this point, it's difficult to say. As the series progresses, it does spend a fair amount of time on Virginia, so in the grand scheme of things, she may be the hero. The second volume, Somewhere Out West, is entirely devoted to one setting. It takes place during 1982 at a small town called Seaside. Every single character introduced in the first volume appears at some point during this storyline. All these separate lives collide in a series of conclusive, violent episodes, and not everyone makes it out alive. This is one aspect that makes Stray Bullets a compelling read. While there are some characters that are favored by the creator, such as Virginia and possibly Beth, no one else seems to have plot armor. When a character gets into a bad situation, bad things usually happen to them. No one is safe, and there's a real sense of tension when events start to take a dark turn. A happy or comfortable ending is not guaranteed. The first and second volume set up the narrative pattern the series will follow. The pattern begins with a group of self-contained stories focused on different characters. The pattern ends with one continuous story featuring those characters. Their involvement ranges from minor to lead. Not everyone is pivotal, and their effect on the larger story may be minimal, but they are people who have been fleshed out to a degree. So when they appear, we know the life they've lived before that moment, and why they are included. In some ways, this is similar to the approach Neil Gaiman took with Sandman, but in reverse. In Sandman, minor characters would be elevated to a lead role. In Stray Bullets, characters with a single issue focused on them become minor characters in someone else's story. The third volume, Other People, is an odd mix of single-issue stories, all of which takes place in Los Angeles between 1982 and 1986. It begins with an epilogue to the previous volume, showing Beth and Virginia in Los Angeles. It's here we get the origin of Amy Racecar, and we meet the sleazy character, Ricky Fish, and the serial temptress, Amelia. The fourth volume, Dark Days, is very tough to get through. Anyone with a sensitivity to child abuse will need to proceed cautiously. It gets very dark. Nothing is portrayed graphically, and the narrative implies a lot more than it shows, but even then, it's some rather tough material. It's about Virginia and a friend who narrowly escape a lengthy abduction, but not without severe trauma. The fifth volume, Hi-Jinks and Daring Do, focuses on a teenage Virginia being integrated into school after her time as a runaway. It's here the original series came to an end. Stray Bullets launched in 1995, at a time when the comic book market was rather terrible, and it was even worse for self-published black and white titles. Even the highly successful Bone had to temporarily move to Image to avoid the consequences of an unstable market. So it was a pretty tough time for a new title to find an audience. Its publishing schedule was also quite erratic. A 3 or 4 month delay between issues was not uncommon, which likely hurt its ability to find and maintain an audience. Yet despite these challenges, the series ran for 40 issues over the next decade. Then in 2005, with only 1 issue left to complete the Hi-Jinks story, the series went on hiatus. Lapham has stated he needed to take mainstream jobs in order to support his family, and that was the reason why he had to stop publishing Stray Bullets. He took various odd jobs with Marvel and DC to pay the bills, and during this time, he put out the short-lived Vertigo series, Young Liars. He also did a fair amount of work for Avatar, writing Dan the Unharmable and the Garth Ennis zombie series, Crossed. Stray Bullets remained on hiatus for 9 long years. Then in 2014, a collected edition, Uber Alice, was published by Image Comics. This edition contained the complete original series, including the final part of the Hi-Jinks storyline, which was also published as a single issue. Shortly thereafter, a new 8-issue series, Killers, was launched. Sunshine and Roses followed, and it ran for 42 issues, although it experienced massive delays for the final 2 issues. Once again, in 2020, Stray Bullets went on hiatus, while also announcing the next series would be called Virginia, which is where it currently remains, with no indication when it might return. The entire history of Stray Bullets to date looks like this: Stray Bullets 1 to 41, Killers 1 to 8, Sunshine and Roses 1 to 42. There's also 2 Amy Race Car Color specials that were published in the late 90s. These are oddball side stories that aren't connected with Stray Bullets continuity. They're good, but not essential material, and probably difficult to find, since I don't believe they've been reprinted. Each issue usually opens with 3 panels and closes with 2. Which is, to use a movie analogy, the story fading in on an establishing shot and fading out on a wide angle. It doesn't strictly adhere to this format, but it typically does. The entire issue then conforms to an unusual 8-panel grid. Perhaps, in part, these 4 layers with 2 panels are used because they resemble the size and shape of a television screen. So much like a TV show, the shape of the panel indicates it's an ongoing series of events told in an episodic format. The story unrolls like a strip of film or videotape. It's one continuous flow of images. At least, that's my impression. The art style is stripped down, but very expressive. One rarely gets lost during an action sequence or when the story shifts from one scene to another. It all feels very intuitive and organic. While crime stories tend to use heavy blacks to evoke an impressionistic, dark mood, within Stray Bullets, darkness is usually reserved to indicate time of day. Otherwise, everything is bright and clear. Again, it gives one the impression it's a TV show being shot on a well-lit stage. In the end, Stray Bullets is a compelling, dramatic narrative with a criminal element attached. It takes twists and turns, at times when it's most inconvenient for the characters involved. In those moments, not everyone makes good or rational choices, but everyone faces the consequences. And it's thematically consistent. It reminds you, without being explicit, that the future's uncertain and the end is always near. Thank you for watching, or listening, whatever the case may be. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, leave a like, and a comment. That helps this channel out, and it's a fine way of showing support for scripted, measured content like this. If you'd like to go a step further with your support, there's a link to my Patreon down below. Recently, I've started posting uncensored, quick reviews of new comics there. By that I mean I don't cover up nudity or any adult language. Otherwise, I'm my usual reserved self. Additional thanks to all my fine supporters on YouTube and Patreon. I appreciate every single one of you. Extra special thanks to John Nowyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Phil Sagan, Corey Drew, L.S. Gregor, Alexa Zernish, Brian Deaton, Johnny Lim, Steve White, Taylor Dull, and Matt Marino. You are all justified and ancient. Hey look, a playlist. Check it out for a variety of fine video products. Until next time.